Have you ever wondered what it would feel like to wake up one morning in ancient Egypt? No phone buzzing on the nightstand, no morning coffee, no air conditioning, just sunlight, dust, river wind, and a rhythm of life so slow, so deliberate, that time itself seems to breathe. Imagine standing beside the Nile at dawn. The water glows silver beneath the pale light, and the first sounds of morning are soft and far away. A bird's call, a faint rustle of reeds, the whisper of sand under bare feet. People stir inside houses made of mud and straw, built to breathe with the heat. Doors creak open. Fires are lit. Water is drawn. The day begins not with rush or noise, but with quiet precision. Every motion repeated for generations, each gesture fitting neatly into the calm rhythm of survival. There are no deadlines here, no alarms counting minutes. Only the heartbeat of work, the pulse of water, the steady rise of the sun. Each life moves in harmony with the land, following the same gentle pattern that has shaped every dawn before it. And through centuries, from the riverbanks of Egypt to the stone avenues of Teotihuacan, from the echo of the first drum to the glow of Manhattan's skyline, one rhythm remains. The rhythm of labor, of breath, of being, unchanged, endless, the quiet heartbeat of humanity itself. Ancient Egypt, the rhythm of daily life. The morning on the Nile. The morning begins slowly along the Nile. The air is cool, carrying the faint scent of river water and dust. The light is pale and silver at first, spreading softly across the horizon, brushing over the quiet surface of the water. The river moves without hurry, steady and endless, whispering against the reeds that line its banks. Somewhere in the distance, a bird calls once, and the sound travels far. The first ripples catch the light. A thin mist drifts above the water, fading as the sun grows stronger. On the eastern bank, a cluster of small houses begins to wake. The walls are made of mud and straw, shaped by hand, built to breathe with the heat of the day. Their flat roofs hold the traces of the night's cool air. The people inside begin to stir. Doors made from woven reeds creak open. Sand shifts softly under bare feet. The first movements of the day are slow and careful, not rushed, not loud. A pot is lifted, a fire is stirred, water is drawn. The rhythm of the morning begins like a familiar song that has been played for generations. The Nile glows a muted gold now as the sun climbs just above the horizon. A small wooden boat, long and narrow, drifts near the bank. Two men push it forward with long poles, moving smoothly across the calm water. Their reflections follow beneath them, slightly broken by the ripples. A woman kneels near the river's edge, filling a clay jar. She moves without hesitation the same way she did the day before and the day before that. Each motion has been repeated so many times that it no longer feels like a task. It is simply part of the morning itself. Children walk beside her, still sleepy. They gather dry reeds, their small hands brushing against the soft edges. The sounds they make are light and scattered. Footsteps, whispers, a quiet laugh that disappears quickly into the wide space of the river valley. Farther inland, the first sunlight reaches the fields. The land near the Nile is dark and rich after the season of flood. The smell of wet soil mixes with the faint smoke of morning fires. Men and women walk to the edges of their plots, carrying wooden tools smoothed by use. They begin to work before the sun becomes harsh. Each strike of the hoe makes a soft, dull sound against the earth. The rhythm is unbroken.
The same sound has echoed here for centuries. Steady, patient, almost like breathing.
A breeze moves gently through the air, lifting the edges of light cloth and carrying the scent of grain. In the distance, the flat horizon shimmers. The color of the landscape changes slowly from pale yellow to a warm amber tone. By now, the day has fully begun. The river widens under the growing light. Boats drift past, each one moving at its own pace, each carrying the quiet purpose of daily life. Bundles of reeds, jars of water, baskets of fresh clay. On the shore, a man pauses to rest his hands on his knees.
He looks toward the water and breathes deeply. There is no rush, no need to speak. The morning will stretch itself out, calm and predictable, like it always does. The world is simple here, not empty, not silent, but balanced.
The water flows, the air warms, the light expands. Every sound has its place, every movement fits within another. In the distance, a line of palm trees sways gently. The light catches on their leaves, shimmering briefly before fading again. Shadows begin to shorten. The day settles into its slow rhythm. People move back and forth, their figures small against the brightness of the sun. The hum of quiet activity fills the air. A murmur of footsteps, the soft brushing of fabric, the low crackle of firewood. And still, beneath everything, the river continues to move. It does not hurry, it does not pause. Its surface glimmers, smooth and endless, carrying reflections of light toward the horizon. The morning along the Nile is complete. The first hours of the day unfold in stillness and order, untouched by time. The river, the people, the land, all moving together, slowly, gently, without beginning or end. Daily routine. Farming, food, rest under the sun. As the sun climbs higher, the land begins to glow. The light turns from pale gold to white and warm, spreading across the fields that lie close to the river. The thin mist of early morning has lifted, leaving the air clear and dry. A faint hum of movement begins to rise, the low sound of work starting for the day. In the distance, small groups of farmers move across the land. Their shadows stretch long behind them, dark against the bright earth. They walk slowly, balancing wooden tools on their shoulders, heading toward the soft, dark soil that borders the Nile. The ground there is damp, easy to turn. When the floodwaters had withdrawn, they left a fine layer of rich silt, black and smooth, the gift that allowed the fields to live again. The farmers begin their work quietly. The tools lift and fall in a measured rhythm, each motion following the next with patient precision. The air fills with the muted sound of contact. Wood against soil, soil against wood. It is a steady heartbeat, unbroken and unhurried. A few oxen move through the fields, guided by hands that know every curve of the land. Leather cords hang loose from their yokes. The animals breathe heavily, their sides glistening with the beginning of sweat. They step forward, dragging the simple plough through the wet earth. Behind them, neat lines appear, marking where seeds will soon be dropped. Women walk along the edges of the fields, carrying baskets woven from reeds. Inside are seeds, barley, wheat, lentils, small and dry, ready for another season. They scatter them with smooth, practiced motions. The grains fall softly, disappearing almost at once into the turned soil. Children run nearby, laughing in the sunlight, their feet leaving shallow prints in the mud. A small boy stops to pick up a smooth stone, tosses it, then continues running. The sound of his footsteps blends with the gentle swish of reeds in the wind. Nothing is loud, even laughter here feels soft and far away. By late morning, the sun begins to strengthen. Its warmth spreads across the open plain, and the air grows heavy. The light is so bright it seems to erase shadows. The workers move more slowly now. Sweat darkens their linen tunics, dust clings to their legs. They pause more often, wiping their faces with the edges of their garments. The river glimmers nearby, reflecting the sky like polished metal. The current is slow, steady, unchanged. It carries with it the faint scent of water plants and silt. From time to time, someone leaves the field and walks to the riverbank to rinse their hands, cool their arms, or fill a jar with water for the others. When it is nearly midday, the work stops and the people gather in the shade of the few trees that grow near the edge of the village. Small acacias with wide branches and thin leaves. They sit on the ground or on flat stones, forming small circles. The tools are laid aside and the air is filled with the soft sound of breathing and the low murmur of voices. Meals are simple, but they are shared. Flat loaves of barley bread, rough at the edges, baked early that morning on clay ovens, a bowl of crushed beans mixed with herbs, a handful of dates, a jug of cool water from the river, and a small clay jar of beer, thick and mild, made from the same grain they harvest. Each person eats slowly, not speaking much. The silence is comfortable. The taste of the bread is dry and faintly sweet. The wind moves through the reeds and tall grass, whispering softly. Some lie back against the trunks of the trees, eyes closed, letting the warmth of the air press gently against their skin. A few continue to talk quietly, voices drifting, fading, returning again like waves.
For a short while, everything is still.
The sun above is bright, but not cruel yet. The horizon quivers with a shimmer of heat. The river sounds distant now, a low and constant murmur. A woman stands and walks to the water's edge.
She kneels, rinses a cloth, and lays it across her forehead.
Nearby, two men sit side by side, heads bowed, resting their hands on their knees. One hums a tune so soft it barely carries. It is a tune without words, the kind that passes from one generation to another, remembered but never written. After some time, the group begins to move again. The pause has done its work. The tools are lifted, baskets gathered, jars emptied. The voices grow slightly louder, though still calm, steady. The rhythm of labor begins again, the same as before. The afternoon will be long, but no one minds. The work is old and known. Each gesture follows another, predictable and sure. The soil accepts the seed. The hands repeat their movement.
The water waits nearby, ready to rise again when the season turns.
The sun hangs high now, white and unwavering. From above, the fields appear as wide patches of green and brown, divided by narrow paths that wind toward the river. The figures of the workers move slowly across them, small shapes, in an endless landscape. Nothing urgent happens here.
The day unfolds as it always has, in quiet order.
The air is full of the scent of earth, grain, and warmth. Everything glows softly, suspended between the brightness of the sky and the dark steadiness of the soil. The Nile flows beside it all, silent and sure. It watches without judgment, carrying the reflection of the afternoon sun down its long, patient course. The people return to their work. The earth opens beneath their hands, and time, unbroken and smooth, continues its slow passage through another ordinary, perfect day. Evening, transitions, slow movement of light and sound. The afternoon stretches on, long and golden. The light begins to soften, shifting from white to a gentle amber tone. Across the wide plain, heat still trembles above the soil, but the sharp edge of the sun begins to fade. Shadows, thin at midday, lengthen slowly, returning to the land. In the fields, the rhythm of work changes. The sound of tools against earth grows slower, the pauses longer. Hands move without urgency now, finishing what remains before the day exhales into evening. Dust rises in faint clouds, catching the light like a thin veil of smoke. The oxen rest near the edge of the field, standing still, tails flicking lazily. Their sides rise and fall in calm motion. The air around them is filled with the soft murmur of insects waking for the night. From far away comes the low call of a heron moving along the water's edge. The workers gather their baskets. They walk the narrow paths between the plots, their steps unhurried, the sound of their feet muffled by soil. The river glows brighter now than the sky, a ribbon of silver bending through the landscape. It reflects every color that the evening brings. The air carries a faint coolness that wasn't there before. A soft wind moves inland from the water, brushing the tall reeds until they bend together, whispering. A few leaves drift from a branch and land soundlessly on the surface of the river. The current takes them and turns them slowly, carrying them out of sight. At the village edge, the first fires are lit. Thin trails of smoke rise and twist, pale against the darkening sky. Children return from the fields, their arms full of reeds and sticks. Their voices are quiet now, the play of morning replaced by the calm of evening. A woman kneels by a clay oven, feeding it with handfuls of dry grass. The flames catch quickly, flickering in orange bursts that dance against her face. Nearby, another stirs a pot, the scent of grain and herbs drifting through the air. The smoke mixes with the smell of dust and water, creating a familiar fragrance that settles like memory. Men sit on low stools, mending nets and baskets. They speak little, their voices low, their movements steady. The fading light wraps around them, golden at first, then slowly turning blue. Farther down the path, a child hums a tune, one that will fade with the night. The sky deepens, the sun lowers behind the distant line of palms, its glow spreading wide before slipping away completely. Colors shift. Orange to rose, rose to violet, violet into the calm of dusk. The river reflects every change, each shade appearing and disappearing across its surface like slow-moving clouds. As darkness approaches, the temperature drops. The air feels different now, lighter, cleaner, and still. Sounds sharpen in the coolness. A soft splash, a quiet laugh, the steady crackle of firewood. No one hurries, the day has done its work. People gather near the houses. They eat together, their movements measured and familiar. Bread is broken, water poured, and conversation drifts in and out of silence. The world seems smaller now, enclosed by the night's slow descent. Beyond the village, the fields are empty, glowing faintly in the afterlight. The paths remain visible for a while, pale against the dark soil. Then they fade, one by one, as the sky deepens into indigo. The stars appear quietly, without ceremony, first one, then another, then hundreds. The river continues its slow journey. It glides past the sleeping reeds, carrying fragments of reflected starlight. Its sound is low, constant, and reassuring, the same sound heard since the beginning of memory. The wind softens again. Smoke from the evening fires drifts upward, spreading thin until it disappears. The last conversations fade into murmurs. A child yawns, a door closes gently, and the silence grows. In the darkness, only the faint glow of embers remains. The land exhales. The people rest.
And the rhythm of the Nile, calm, ancient, endless, continues, flowing beneath the stars, marking the quiet passage of another day.
Nightfall and stars. The Nile continues, flowing. The last light of the sun fades behind the horizon. A soft grey spreads over the fields, and the colours of the day begin to dissolve. The air cools, carrying with it the scent of wet earth and smoke from evening fires. The sounds of the day grow distant. A final murmur of voices, the quiet shift of feet, then stillness. The first stars appear, faint and scattered. They tremble gently above the wide river, their reflections flickering on the surface. The Nile has changed colour. It is now a deep, slow-moving shadow, lined with silver. Its sound is steady and low, like breathing in the dark. In the village, small lamps glow behind reed doors. The light is soft, golden, and motionless. A few figures move outside, closing jars, tying bundles, speaking in whispers. The ground is cool beneath their feet, and the air moves lightly against their skin. A breeze drifts across the riverbank, carrying the faint rustle of reeds. The sound repeats like a quiet rhythm, blending with the low hum of the water. Far away, an animal calls once, then silence returns. The world seems suspended, balanced between motion and rest. The moon rises slowly, pale and round, climbing the open sky.
It paints the land with soft light, revealing outlines of huts, trees and paths.
The river mirrors it perfectly, a second moon traveling downstream. Everything moves together, moon, water, wind, in calm agreement. Inside the homes, people lie down on woven mats. Their breathing evens out, their bodies easing into the night.
The warmth of the day fades from the walls, leaving a gentle coolness.
Outside, embers dim, and the last voices fade away. Now, only the river remains awake.
It slides through the darkness, smooth and constant, carrying the memory of the day.
The stars gather above it in quiet patterns. The night deepens, patient and vast. The Nile continues to flow, calm, timeless, unbroken. A quiet thread of silver winding through the heart of the sleeping land. The city of stone, Teotihuacan and its feathered temple. The geometry of a city. Between the high valleys of what is now central Mexico, where the air is thin and the horizon stretches endlessly beneath a blazing sky, there once stood a city of stone. It rose long before memory began, on a land that seemed forever bathed in sunlight. Mornings they were bright and dry, the sky a pale, distant blue, the air still and cool before the noon heat arrived. The city was called Teotihuacan. From the plain it emerged with an order so precise, so deliberate, that its angles and lines seemed to trace the movement of the sun itself. From above it looked like a vast geometric web, straight roads cutting across the land, rectangles of perfect symmetry, long corridors where light and shadow flowed together like water. At its heart ran the Avenue of the Dead, the city's central artery. It stretched for miles, wide enough that hundreds could walk side by side. The ground beneath their feet was paved with gravel, smooth from centuries of passage, warm under the sun, cool at night. On either side stood low walls marking the boundaries of courtyards and plazas, each stone placed with care. Along this immense avenue, the pulse of the city could be felt. There were temples, pyramids, and houses carved from the same enduring stone. People walked in steady rhythm, their steps even, their movements guided by a plan drawn long ago. When the sun rose, its first light poured straight down the avenue, gilding the stone in gold. When the moon was full, it drifted slowly above the rooftops, reflected in the geometry below. The city breathed with quiet purpose. Men and women moved through its spaces as though they belonged to the rhythm of stone and time. Some carried bundles of pottery, others balanced baskets of grain upon their heads. Children followed in their shadows, their silhouettes stretching endlessly across the glowing ground. The soft slap of sandals on stone mingled with low voices, with the whisper of wind between the walls. At the city's edges, small gardens blossomed between buildings, rows of maize growing in perfect lines, their leaves rustling softly in the dry air. Clay jars sat beneath the sun, their surfaces glowing red and black, warm to the touch. Dogs wandered freely, curling up wherever a patch of shade offered rest. The houses stood close together, forming neighborhoods within the larger grid. Each dwelling had a broad courtyard at its center, a calm space surrounded by walls smoothed and painted in pale earth tones, ochre, lime, and faded green. Inside, the rooms were cool and dim, filled with the faint scent of smoke and clay. Life was quiet, deliberate. Everything in Teotihuacan was placed with intention. Streets crossed at exact angles, temples faced the cardinal directions. Each structure seemed to belong to a greater design, one too vast to see from the ground. It was as if the city's builders had drawn the earth itself into a single, silent order. As the day unfolded, light moved slowly across the stones. Morning brightness softened into afternoon haze, and the colors of the city deepened, from pale gray to warm gold, then to the tranquil blue of evening. The stones absorbed the sun's heat, and when night came, released it again like a quiet breath. In this geometry of stillness, life continued without haste. The people of Teotihuacan lived inside their design, as though it guided every gesture, every sound. The rhythm of their steps, the murmur of their speech, the distant barking of a dog, all seemed to align with the slow, unending pulse of the city. Teotihuacan was more than stone. It was an idea made visible, a belief that the world could be measured, ordered, and understood. Its builders looked at the landscape and imposed symmetry upon it, drawing lines that echoed the heavens. Their great avenue pointed toward the mountains, where the sun rose and set with ritual precision. Their temples rose like mountains themselves, mirroring the peaks beyond. When the wind passed through the city, it moved through corridors of stone as if tracing invisible lines of power. Shadows lengthened and folded with the sun's descent. In the evening, the walls glowed faintly with the warmth of the day, and the city seemed to hum with the energy of the stones themselves. At night, the people gathered in their courtyards. Fires flickered in clay bowls, sending light dancing over painted walls. The air smelled of maize and wood smoke. Above them, the stars appeared, countless and sharp in the thin air. The same stars their ancestors had aligned the city to follow. Teotihuacan was not built merely to house people. It was built to express an order, to make visible the invisible harmony between earth and sky. Every courtyard, every temple, every narrow passage was part of a greater pattern, one that connected the movement of the heavens with the rhythm of daily life. In that vast stillness, time seemed to slow. Days passed not in haste, but in quiet repetition. The city absorbed centuries as easily as it absorbed sunlight. Even as generations came and went, the stones remained, warm in the day, cool in the night, patient beneath the sky. And so, amid the long boulevards and measured walls, among the sounds of footsteps and wind, Teotihuacan endured, a city that dreamed in geometry, where human life moved to the calm heartbeat of stone and sun. The temple and its carvings. At the southern end of the great avenue rose the temple of the feathered serpent, its form both earthly and celestial, a mountain built by human hands. From the flat plain it ascended in measured steps, each terrace cut with exact geometry, rising layer upon layer toward the pale Mexican sky. It did not simply stand on the earth, it seemed to grow from it, as though the stones themselves had chosen to assemble into form. Every surface of the temple bore the marks of devotion. Across its sides stretched rows of serpent heads emerging boldly from the walls. Their jaws were open in perpetual motion, tongues of stone frozen mid-flicker, eyes wide and watchful. Centuries ago, these carvings had been painted, brilliant and alive. Traces of that color still clung to the stone, flecks of red, turquoise, white, like memory etched into rock. Under the sun, those pigments would once have shimmered like the scales of living creatures, catching the light with every change of day. Now they remained only as ghosts of brilliance, softened by wind and time, their beauty whispered rather than declared. The artisans who had shaped these serpents worked with patience that bordered on reverence, with obsidian blades sharp as glass and stone hammers heavy as bone. They chipped and smoothed, cut and polished. Each curve, each spiral of feather and scale was coaxed out of the rock, one careful stroke at a time. From dawn to dusk they worked on scaffolds of wood, balanced above the rising terraces. The air shimmered with heat and dust. Each strike of their tools sent tiny silver clouds drifting through the sunlight, like incense offered to the sky. When the sun grew fierce and the stone too hot to touch, they descended to the shadows at the temple's base. There, beneath the carved serpents, they rested. Clay jars filled with cool water passed from hand to hand. Their skin gleamed with sweat and stone dust, their fingers roughened and calloused but steady, precise. In that stillness, they could look up at what they had made. Lines of perfect symmetry, faces of gods gazing back in silence. Nearby, the workshops hummed with quieter rhythms. Here, creation took softer forms. Men and women shaped clay with their palms, turning it gently into bowls, jars, and small figurines. They dipped their hands into water to smooth each surface, their movements slow, unhurried. Others ground minerals into fine powders, mixing them into pigments of ochre, blue, and green. Their fingers, stained with color, moved with a ritual familiarity, an art passed from parent to child. In one corner, weavers sat at low looms, drawing threads through threads. The pattern grew beneath their hands like a secret language. lines of crimson, gold, and brown. The sound of weaving, the gentle thrum of thread against wood, merged with the soft tap of chisels and the murmur of voices. Together they formed the heartbeat of the city, the sound of work, measured not by urgency, but by care. Nothing in Teotihuacan was rushed. Each act, carving, weaving, shaping, painting, seemed to move within the same calm rhythm that governed the stones and the sky. It was as if the city itself demanded patience, asking its people to work at the pace of the earth. By midday, heat lay heavy across the open plazas. The air shimmered and the stones radiated warmth. Shadows retreated until they disappeared beneath walls and awnings. People drifted toward the shaded corridors where cool air lingered along the stone floors. They sat in circles, eating meals of maize cakes, beans, and fruit water, tinged with the scent of crushed berries. Voices were low, gentle, unhurried. In the distance, the hum of insects rose and fell, echoing against the stone. In courtyards, children played, their laughter ringing softly against the walls. They rolled polished stones that glittered in the sunlight, chased one another around pillars, their bare feet scattering dust. For a moment, the geometry of the city seemed to loosen, laughter breaking through the symmetry. The elders watched from the shade, faces still and knowing. Their eyes followed the play of light and motion, as if reading meaning in each gesture. Time moved differently for them. Each hour stretched long and quiet, filled with the rhythm of watching and remembering. As the afternoon waned, sunlight once again touched the temple's face. From the west, it poured across the carvings, igniting each serpent head in turn. The stones seemed to breathe, scales brightening for a heartbeat before sinking back into shadow. The wind picked up, sweeping through the avenues, carrying the dry scent of dust and earth. Somewhere, faintly, a pot cracked in the kiln. A small sound, clear and delicate, echoing for a moment before vanishing. When the day's work was done, the artisans rose. They brushed the dust from their arms, gathered their tools, and looked upon the world they had shaped. Stone, clay, fabric, each material transformed by patience and repetition, by hands that trusted time more than speed. They set their creations aside to rest in the open air, knowing the heat of day would fade, the light would change, and by morning, everything, the color, the air, even the feeling of the city, would be new again. Above them, the temple of the feathered serpent remained still, timeless. Its angles met the horizon in perfect equilibrium, every line part of a greater harmony. Birds drifted in wide circles above, their shadows sliding across the carvings like passing thoughts. The air cooled. The city began to breathe again. Slow, deliberate, alive. Evening fell gently without announcement. Fires flickered in distant courtyards, voices quieted. The last light of day touched the temple's crown, turning it to gold for an instant before it dimmed into blue. The artisans walked home along the wide avenue, their silhouettes long against the glowing stone. Behind them, the temple stood silent, holding its symmetry against the darkening sky. Teotihuacan slept beneath it, a city not of chaos, but of measured motion, where life unfolded in harmony with the stone. And above, as always, the serpents watched, their gaze eternal, their presence woven into the rhythm of wind, shadow, and time. The city's quiet decline. Time moved as it always does, unseen, unhurried, relentless. Seasons shifted across the high valley, rains came and went, the dry months stretched long under the sun. For a while, Teotihuacan continued in its measured rhythm. the rhythm of stone and wind, until that rhythm began, almost imperceptibly, to slow. The first signs of change were quiet. They did not arrive with ruin, but with subtle wear. Smoke rose from distant quarters where once it had meant life. Cooking fires, workshops, kilns. But now it drifted strangely darker, heavier. A wall blackened here, a roof sagged there. The broad avenues, once swept smooth by countless feet, began to gather dust again. People noticed, but only gradually. Some packed what they could, tools, blankets, small clay bowls, and left toward the north or the mountains beyond the horizon. Others stayed, still walking the same straight roads, though each day there were fewer voices, fewer footsteps echoing off the stone. The air grew thinner, quieter. The markets, once full of colour and barter, became sparse. Stalls emptied, the sound of hammers and looms faded, replaced by wind sighing through abandoned corridors. The workshops cooled, fires in the kilns flickered out, leaving only the scent of old clay and faint ash. Pots lay half-finished, pigments dried in their bowls, threads cut loose from looms. The city that had once breathed with the steady pulse of labour now exhaled into stillness. Grass began to push up between the paving stones. In the courtyards, weeds found cracks in the walls. The murals that had once burned with red and blue began to pale. Rain soaked through the plaster, drawing the colour back into the earth. The carved serpent faces on the temple weathered slowly. Their sharp edges softened, their once fierce eyes turned gentle under the weight of centuries. For a time, Teotihuacan stood half asleep, not yet forgotten, but no longer alive. Its great avenue stretched silent beneath the wide sky, reaching toward mountains hazed with light. When the sun rose, it still traced the same perfect lines of stone, but no one waited to see it. The geometry endured, though the lives that once animated it had drifted away. In the evenings, wind swept through the plazas, whispering over the empty courtyards. Sometimes it seemed to carry echoes, the faint rhythm of footsteps, a child's laughter, the ring of metal on stone. But these were only memories, sounds without source. Among the ruins, a broken pot, a dropped tool, a single footprint hardened in dust told the story of departure. The temples still stood, tall and dignified. Their stones absorbed the day's warmth, releasing it slowly as the stars emerged above. Night after night, they kept watch over the sleeping city. Then centuries began to pass, vast, patient, unmeasured. The rains returned, season after season, washing dust into the carvings, smoothing them further. The earth itself rose. Soil gathered at the bases of the walls, swallowing steps, doorways, thresholds. Trees sent roots through the cracks, gentle but unstoppable, splitting stone apart grain by grain. Yet beneath it all, the structure endured. The avenue remained, buried, hidden, but unbroken. The pattern persisted beneath the soil, the stones holding their silent alignment. When light returned to them centuries later, they would still meet the sun at the same angles, casting the same shadows, as if time had paused to listen. Now in the present, Teotihuacan rests in stillness once more. The air above it is thin and quiet, the hills are dry, the grass sparse and pale. Visitors come softly, their steps careful on the ancient paths. They speak in low voices, as though afraid to disturb what remains of the city's long sleep. They walk where others once lived and worked, following the invisible order drawn thousands of years ago. The temples still rise at the end of the great avenue, their terraces crumbling but proud. The carved serpent heads are worn but visible. Their gaze stretches outward across the plain, where wind moves through tall grass and carries the faint scent of stone warmed by the sun. In the late light of evening, something of the old brilliance returns. The city glows faintly, not with colour, but with memory. The stones hold the warmth of the day like quiet hearts. Shadows lengthen, sliding slowly across the road that once pulsed with life. The air cools. The brightness fades to gold, then to grey, then to the deep blue of night. The sound of the wind softens until it is barely there, a whisper moving through time. The city falls again into the stillness that has always been its nature. Dust begins to settle, drifting through the air in fine veils. Layer upon layer, it gathers on the stones, on the steps, the walls, the broken pots, until everything shares the same colour, the quiet tone of age. The dust does not destroy, it preserves, it wraps the city gently like sleep. And so the world turns and Teotihuacan lies beneath its turning, patient as the earth itself. It does not cry out for remembrance, it does not need witnesses. Its silence is not emptiness, but endurance, a monument to the rhythm that began long before words and will continue long after them. Beneath the quiet sky, the city remains. The geometry still holds, the avenue still points toward the horizon. The temples rest upon their foundations of light and shadow. The wind that once carried voices now carries only air and dust, but in that dust are traces of every life that once passed through. When night deepens and the stars return, the stones reflect their cold light faintly, like old eyes remembering. The city of stone breathes again, not with life, but with presence. Teotihuacan endures, unchanged, unhurried, resting beneath the vast sky, a silent monument to the patience of human hands and the slow, unbroken rhythm of the earth. Early drums, log, skin, sound of hands. Long before stone cities or carved temples, before written words or metal tools, there was sound. It came from the hands of early people striking hollow things. Wood, bark, bone, earth. It came from curiosity first, then from rhythm, then from need. Somewhere in a clearing, under trees older than memory, a fallen trunk lay empty and dry. When a hand touched it, it answered. A deep tone, low and round, rolled through the air. Another hand joined in.
The rhythm began, uneven at first, then steadier, matching the beating of hearts.
The first drum was not yet a drum, it was the space inside the wood, the echo waiting to be found. People learned that stretching animal hide over the hollow deepened the sound. They tied it with vines, tightening and loosening until the tone changed. A single strike could carry far, farther than a shout, beyond the trees, across the open grass. They played beside firelight, where sparks rose into darkness. The rhythm called others closer.
Feet moved, bodies swayed, time bent around the steady pulse.
In that pattern, something ancient and human appeared. Connection without words. The drum became voice, message, memory. Each pattern of beats meant something different. Warning, gathering, greeting. At night, the sound guided travelers home. During storms, it kept courage alive. The hands that struck the skins learned gentleness as well as force. They understood that the sound was not in the hit, but in the echo. Too strong, and the tone was lost. Too soft, and it vanished. Between them lay balance. The same balance found in walking, breathing, and being. As generations passed, people carried the drum with them wherever they went. Across plains, through forests, along rivers, they made new forms, some wide and deep, others narrow and bright. They found that different woods sang different notes, that each animal hide gave its own timbre. Every drum was unique, shaped by the hands that built it and the air that surrounded it.
The rhythm followed them like a quiet companion.
It marked seasons, hunts, journeys, and births. It became the heartbeat of the group, the sound of belonging. And even when silence returned, the memory of rhythm stayed inside the body, waiting to begin again. Part 3. The Long Journey of the Drum. Drums across cultures, Africa, India, Japan. Centuries passed, the world widened, peoples settled in far lands, and everywhere the drum found a new voice. In the warm forests and open savannas of Africa, the drums spoke in sentences, carved from hollowed logs shaped like hourglasses or goblets. Each one carried a distinct tone. When struck with hand or stick, they produced voices, high and low, quick and slow, that could be heard miles away. Messages traveled through trees and valleys. Greetings, warnings, celebrations. Villages answered one another in rhythm, conversations written in sound. The African drum was alive. Its makers treated it with care, rubbing oil into its surface to keep the wood breathing. When played, it resonated not only through air, but through the ground itself, felt in the feet as much as in the ears. The patterns were layered, interlocking rhythms that turned time into texture, weaving sound like fabric. People danced, their movements circling the pulse, every step both response and continuation. Far to the east, across oceans and mountains, another rhythm grew. In India, pairs of small drums called tabla rested before seated players. One drum spoke a higher pitch, the other a lower, deeper tone. Fingers and palms moved with precision, striking in combinations that shaped language from sound. Each pattern had a name, each sequence a structure. Rhythm here was not only felt, it was studied, counted, and sung. In the still air of the Indian morning, the tabla began softly. Notes rolled like water, bright and delicate. The beats expanded faster and fuller, then settled again into calm. The drum was not simply rhythm, it was conversation, dialogue, meditation.
It guided dancers, singers, and those who simply listened with closed eyes.
Across the sea, on islands surrounded by wind and mist, the Japanese taiko drum waited in silence. It was large, carved from single trunks of cedar, its surface stretched with thick hide.
When struck, it did not speak. It thundered. The sound traveled through the chest, deep and physical.
It was rhythm as motion, a wave of air moving outward, touching everything nearby. The players stood tall before it, their movements slow, deliberate, almost ceremonial. Each strike was followed by stillness, as though the air needed time to recover. The sound faded slowly, echoing through temples, forests, and memory. Even when the last vibration died away, its presence remained. Though distant in geography and language, these rhythms shared the same root. Each culture discovered that the drum could speak the body's truth, a pulse of presence, a measure of time, a pattern of life. Wherever people lived, the beat returned, reshaped, renamed, but never lost. Function of rhythm in work, ceremony, communication. Rhythm does more than fill silence. It organizes the day. It gives weight to effort, shape to waiting, comfort to repetition. When people worked together, rhythm held them in sync. In the fields, as hands lifted and struck the soil, songs emerged, slow chants to match the swing of tools. Each verse marked a motion, each pause a breath. In this way, work became music, and labor turned lighter. On long roads, travelers walked to rhythm. Feet met the ground at the same pace, miles passing under the steady count of steps. When tired, one person might begin a soft tapping, and the others would follow, keeping time until the path itself felt shorter. In ceremonies, rhythm gathered everyone into a single moment. A drumbeat could call an entire community together. The first strikes were distant, then nearer, then close enough to feel in the ribs. People would move toward the sound instinctively, drawn by recognition. The pulse welcomed them before words could. Within the circle, the rhythm deepened. It rose and fell like breathing, slow at first, then building, until every listener felt connected to something larger. Not grand, not mystical, just shared. The hands of the players moved with care, never forcing, only guiding the pattern forward. It could last minutes or hours, the beat repeating, changing slightly each time, like the turning of a tide. Drums also spoke across distances. In forests and hills, sound traveled better than voice. A series of beats could signal news, safety, danger, arrival. Two quick, one long, a simple code understood by those who listened. Before roads, before letters, rhythm was communication, the world's earliest wireless language. In quiet evenings, people used rhythm for comfort. A parent's hand on a child's back, patting gently, carried the same logic as any drum. The pattern soothed. It told the body that time was steady, that the world continued, that nothing needed to hurry. Even the smallest gestures, the tapping of fingers on a knee, the sway of a body at rest, belonged to rhythm. It was everywhere, unnoticed yet constant. It joined the outer world with the inner one, linking work and rest, motion and stillness, sound and silence. When storms came or fires burned, rhythm remained. It steadied hearts, reminded hands how to move. And when peace returned, the same pulse carried laughter again, unchanged, waiting beneath the surface. Through centuries, rhythm became the quiet architecture of human life, invisible but always present, holding everything in gentle order. Rhythm within the human body, pulse and breath. Long after the drums fall silent, rhythm continues. It is there in the heartbeat, steady and loyal. It is there in the breath, expanding and releasing. It is there in the small movements of thought, the rise and fall of emotion, the quiet wave of sleep and waking. The body itself is an instrument. Its chambers resonate, its pulse vibrates through the veins like a hidden drum. Even in stillness there is movement. Blood flowing, lungs filling, the tiny rhythm of blinking. These are not sounds to be heard, but to be felt. They remind us that silence is never truly silent. At rest, the human pulse slows to its most natural tempo, about the same pace as a slow hand striking a drum. Each beat marks the moment's passage, calm and unhurried. The body follows its own music, older than any instrument, older than speech. In the dark, when eyes close and the world grows quiet, the inner rhythm becomes clearer. You can sense it without effort. The heart beneath the ribs, the breath at the edge of awareness. It is steady, patient, always returning. The inhale rises like a note, the exhale releases it, fading into the air. The cycle repeats, perfect and complete. The same rhythm lives in oceans and rivers, in wind and trees.
Waves roll in patterns, leaves tremble, branches sway.
The earth itself moves through seasons in long, slow time, expansion and return, light and shadow, growth and rest. Every living thing follows some version of this pulse. Perhaps that is why the drum, in all its forms, feels familiar.
It mirrors the rhythm we already know.
Its sound reminds the body of itself. When the drum plays, we are not hearing something new. We are hearing our own pattern made audible. As the night deepens, the last echo fades. The air holds a lingering vibration, then releases it to quiet. The hands that played grow still. The skins rest, the wood cools. Yet somewhere within, the pulse continues. It keeps time for dreams, for memory, for the slow drift of thought. The rhythm asks for nothing and promises nothing. It simply exists if you listen carefully now, not with ears, but with the soft attention that comes before sleep. You can sense it. The gentle thrum of life moving forward. The slow rise and fall that never ends. The sound without sound. Breathe in. Breathe out. Each breath joins the invisible drumbeat that has guided every life, every moment, since the first hand touched hollow wood. The rhythm remains, calm, endless, returning. A quiet companion in the dark, steady as the turning of the world. The skyline that rose, Manhattan through the centuries. Early settlements and wooden buildings. At the edge of a long island, between the quiet rhythm of river and sea, the first small houses stood. They were simple shapes of wood, rough cut and plain, set close to the shore, where boats could come and go with the changing tide. The ground there was uneven, soft in places where grass met sand, and the air carried the faint scent of salt, pine, and smoke. People worked quietly beside the water. They built with what they had: timber drawn from the nearby forests, nails hammered from old ships, rope that had already known the ocean's pull. Walls went up straight, but not tall. Roofs slanted low to let the rain slide away. Each house was made by hand, each board measured by eye. Smoke rose from short chimneys, twisting softly in the wind before disappearing into open sky. In those early years, the island was wide with space. Paths wound loosely through the tall grass, bending with the shape of the streams. Footsteps pressed into the wet sand and vanished again as the tide came in. There were no streets yet, no pattern to follow, only one home built after another, connected by the quiet rhythm of daily need. Morning began with sound, the call of gulls, the wash of waves, the steady creak of boats against wooden piers. Doors opened, and the faint crackle of cooking fires rose through the damp air. Somewhere, an axe struck wood, a slow, even rhythm that echoed across the small inlet. By midday, wagons moved along narrow lanes, wheels creaking against the planks of small bridges. Children ran beside them, chasing the noise, laughing, their voices soft against the wide stillness. The river reflected all of it: the sky, the boats, the houses. a smooth mirror that shimmered with each passing breeze. Afternoons were quiet. People worked close to the earth, mending nets, shaping beams, collecting reeds from the marsh. In the distance, the forest stood dark and dense, its edge a quiet line against the pale horizon. Birds moved in slow circles above the water, calling now and then before settling again into silence. In the evenings, the color of the air changed. The light turned warm and amber, stretching long across the roofs. The surface of the river caught the reflection of the sky and carried it downstream, where it faded into shadow. People sat outside their doors, resting, their hands still and their faces calm. Voices carried softly between houses, and somewhere a dog barked once, then not again. When winter came, the light thinned. Days shortened. The sun rose late and left early, leaving the land wrapped in a silver quiet.
Snow fell in wide flakes, slow and soundless, covering rooftops until the settlement looked like a cluster of pale stones scattered along the shore.
Smoke curled upward, straight and steady in the cold. The river slowed, edges turning to ice, and the boats slept under layers of frost. Inside the houses, warmth gathered around small stoves. The smell of burning pine filled the rooms. Clothes hung drying above the heat, their shadows moving gently on the walls. Outside, the world faded. Outlines softened by fog, sound muffled by snow. When the wind rose, the shutters rattled softly, and people drew closer to the fire, listening without fear. The rhythm of life never stopped, only slowed, like the heartbeat of the season itself. In spring, the thaw returned with the same quiet patience. Ice melted into trickles that ran down the hill toward the river. The sound of water returned first, soft at dawn, then fuller by midday. Boats were repaired, nets untangled, tools sharpened again. Wood warped, nails loosened, paint flaked away, but the rhythm of repair was familiar. Every sound of hammer and saw belonged to the place. People did not work to grow or to conquer, they worked to remain, to keep the delicate balance between land and sea, between what they built and what the earth allowed. By early summer, the island breathed easily again. Green crept over the fields and flowers appeared along the edges of paths. Fishermen waded knee-deep in the shallows, their reflections trembling in the rippled light. Children played at the water's edge, throwing stones that skipped once, twice, and were gone. The wind moved steadily through the reeds, whispering against the wooden walls. The sea answered in slow rhythm, each wave following the one before. At night, the town rested. Oil lamps glowed behind shutters one by one, until the island became a small constellation of lights spread low across the dark. From far out on the water, it must have looked like stars that had fallen gently onto the earth. The wind came off the sea, carrying the scent of salt and the faint song of ropes tightening against masts. Wooden walls creaked as they cooled, speaking softly in the language of the night. There was no rush, no noise of machines, no constant movement. Only the measured pulse of living, rising with the sun, pausing with the evening, beginning again each morning. The city that would one day rise into the sky slept low to the ground, breathing with the rhythm of tide and wind. Time moved slowly. Generations passed like quiet waves. One family left, another arrived, and still the same fires burned behind the same walls. Children grew tall and built their own houses beside their parents. The sound of work, of laughter, of small footsteps. It all became the voice of the place itself. In the far distance, ships came and went. Their sails appeared on the horizon like clouds, moving across the water until they disappeared again. With them came stories, new tools, unfamiliar words, small hints of the world beyond the island. But here, life remained simple, its pattern unchanged. Some nights the moon rose full over the river. Its light spilled across the roofs and caught in the ripples of the tide. The water glowed softly, pale as glass. A lone figure might walk the shoreline then, listening to the hush of waves meeting sand. The world around would feel endless, but the moment itself, small, gentle, complete. Every board, every path, every lamp belonged to that slow unfolding of time. The sound of the sea, the whisper of pine, the rhythm of labor and rest, they wove together into a single, quiet existence. No one thought of towers or bridges yet. The city of the future slept within the city of wood, waiting for its turn to wake. And so the island remained between river and sea, between dawn and dusk, balanced perfectly on the line where water meets land. It was here that the first heartbeat of the Skyline began. Soft, patient, and low to the ground, a rhythm that would never truly stop, only rise 1 century at a time, until wood became stone and stone became steel, and the island that once whispered now spoke in light. The rise of steel elevators and vertical design. Time moved forward, and the island began to change. The soft hills that once carried trees and open fields grew smaller beneath the weight of new streets. Stone replaced wood, and iron replaced stone. The familiar scent of pine faded, replaced by the sharper smell of smoke, coal, and oil. The quiet rhythm of waves was joined by another rhythm, the slow, constant hum of progress. Where cottages once stood, new buildings rose from the earth. First 3 stories, then 5, then 10. The skyline began to gather shape, its edges straight and deliberate. The sound of hammers still filled the air, but now it rang against metal instead of wood. Each strike was brighter, quicker, echoing between walls and alleyways. Steam rose from the engines that powered machines, carts clattered over cobblestone streets. The city's old silence gave way to movement, steady, layered, alive. A new material had entered the world, steel. It was strong, flexible, and full of quiet promise. Builders learned to trust it. They discovered that weight could rise instead of spread, that walls could hold not by thickness, but by strength. The ground no longer limited them. The horizon began to lift. Foundations sank deep into the bedrock, and from those hidden depths, the new towers began to climb, light and determined. In wide workshops near the river, men shaped the bones of the future. Beams were heated until they glowed, then cooled and marked with numbers and names. Each rivet carried a purpose. Each length of steel fit another, like a slow-moving puzzle that reached toward the clouds. When dawn broke, the builders climbed the scaffolds, their figures small against the rising forms. The wind touched their clothes and the city watched them, these quiet silhouettes mapping the shape of a world not yet finished. Higher and higher the structures grew. From the streets below, the sight of them seemed impossible. Lines of metal crossing sky, the morning light glinting on every edge. At sunset, the half-built frames turned bronze, the air between them filled with dust that glowed as if lit from within. Each evening, when work stopped, the sound of tools fading into distance, the towers stood in silence, open to wind and stars. Soon after came the elevator, a quiet revolution of motion. It looked small, a wooden box held by cables and counterweights, but it changed the city's rhythm completely. No longer did people climb stair after stair. They were lifted smoothly and safely from ground to sky. The sound of doors sliding open, the faint ring of a bell, became the new heartbeat of the city. The elevator was invisible music, a pulse that allowed the city to grow tall without exhaustion. With it, the skyline began to take its form. Line by line, the buildings rose, their reflections multiplying across the river. Each facade caught the light and gave it back in shards and glimmers. Glass faced glass. Light met light. At noon, the streets were bright with reflection. At evening, the same light turned warm and golden. The edges of every structure glowed softly, each window a small square of gold, stacked above another, hundreds upon hundreds of small suns hanging in the air. Below, the streets darkened earlier now. The height of the buildings blocked the last of the day. Shadows stretched long between them, filled with the hum of engines, the slow rhythm of footsteps, the low murmur of work. Steam drifted upward from manholes and vents, blending with the twilight, until it seemed the city breathed through every crack and pipe. Wind moved differently between the towers. It no longer blew across open ground, but wove through narrow spaces, whistling softly as it passed. Pigeons nested in ledges far above the noise. Their wings flashed briefly in the fading light before disappearing into the dark. From the river, the new skyline looked like a sculpture of silver and shadow, its surface smooth yet alive,
its movement hidden within.
Inside the tall buildings, rooms were small but bright. Typewriters clicked in even rhythm, each key a quiet note in the long song of work. Telephones rang softly. Voices answered, then faded. Paper moved from desk to desk, marked with lines of black ink, records of hours that slipped by unnoticed. The hum of electricity joined the music of labor, a soundless current that made everything possible. In the harbor, ships arrived with goods from far places. Boxes of grain, barrels of oil, fabrics and tools. The cargo of the wide world flowed into the narrow island. From the bridges, trains crossed the river in slow procession, their wheels singing softly on steel rails. The city gathered it all, sound, smoke, language, and motion, and turned it into something bright and restless. Energy. At dusk, the sky filled with reflections. Windows caught the last light of day and returned it in fragments. Each pane became a mirror, showing another part of the city. It was as though the buildings spoke to one another in silent flashes, a conversation of brightness across the evening air. Then came the moment of transformation. As night approached, the lights turned on. First a few, then hundreds, then thousands. They rose floor by floor, an upward flow of gold and white. The island began to glow, its streets linked to its towers linked to the stars. From afar, it seemed as though the city had lifted itself from the earth, weightless, suspended in light. The wind drifted softly between the structures, carrying with it the faint hum of generators and the pulse of late trains. Somewhere, a bell rang from a harbor ship, its echo mingling with the whisper of the tide. In every window, a small world continued. Someone reading, someone writing, someone simply watching the lights below. The city's breath quickened, but its heart remained steady. a rhythm of construction, invention, and quiet endurance. Beneath the noise, the same calm order held, the same patience that once guided hands of wood and stone. The people of this age worked not so differently from those who built before them. Each beam they raised, each rivet they set, was another step in the long, unbroken act of making, and when the night was full and the streets were empty, the towers still glowed, not as monuments, but as steady lanterns marking the passage of time. The island no longer slept close to the ground. It floated lightly in its own reflection, a quiet constellation made by human hands, resting in the calm current of the river and the endless hum of light. Light, windows, evening reflections, slow urban night. The city now stands tall, a quiet forest made of glass and shadow. Day slips gently down its sides, sliding from gold to silver, from silver to the deep calm of blue. Far below, the river catches every change and carries it away in long ribbons of reflected light. The air cools, the streets begin to glow. Windows remain bright long after sunset. In each one, a separate world moves softly. A figure leaning near the glass, a lamp left burning, a curtain breathing in an unseen wind. From far away, these tiny squares of brightness look like constellations arranged by human hands. The towers seem to hum with quiet life, each window a pulse, each reflection a note. As traffic slows, the city exhales. Engines murmur less. The heavy rhythm of the day loosens into a lighter pattern. Footsteps, laughter, the hush of distant conversation. A few drops of rain begin to fall, slow at first, then steady. Umbrellas open in a practiced motion, dark shapes gliding beneath the soft halos of street lamps. Water gathers in thin silver streams along the curbs, tracing the same paths laid down generations ago. Cafes fill with warmth, cups touch saucers. Spoons stir gently, and the windows fog and clear again. A man turns the page of a newspaper. Someone writes a note on a napkin.
Outside, the rain draws faint ripples on puddles. Inside, time stretches, smooth and unhurried.
The air carries many scents. Bread baking, wet pavement, the distant smoke of a ferry crossing the river. Overhead, neon signs flicker awake. Red, blue, and pale green light drift across wet asphalt, folding into each other until the reflections become silver. Buses pass slowly, their windows glowing with quiet silhouettes. Voices blur together, soft and low, as though the city itself were whispering to stay awake a little longer. Up above, in high offices and quiet apartments, the noise thins almost to nothing. Only the wind remains moving between the edges of the buildings. It hums softly, a tone too deep to notice until the silence grows around it. A sheet of paper flutters near an open window, then rests again. Plants tremble in the gentle current of air. From the tallest floors, the city stretches outward like an ocean of light. Bridges curve across the dark water in arcs of gold. Streets draw delicate lines that vanish into haze. Somewhere, a clock chimes the hour. Its sound moves slowly through the air, echoing between towers before dissolving. Along the rivers, the surface shines, calm, dark, alive with reflection. The Hudson and the East River carry fragments of light from ferries and buildings, scattering them like floating stars. A tugboat passes, leaving ripples that widen and fade, Its low engine hums like a distant heartbeat, constant and patient. On the sidewalks, people walk in pairs or alone. Their reflections glide beside them in the glass of shop windows. A few glance upward, though the tops of the towers are lost in night and mist. Above them, real stars glimmer faintly. And for a moment, the lights of earth and the lights of sky seem to meet halfway. Impossible to tell one from the other. As midnight nears, the city's tempo slows again. Offices darken one by one. Elevators sigh down their shafts for the final time that day. Doors close, footsteps echo once, then fade. The last trains pass beneath the ground, a deep vibration that lingers for a moment, then disappears. Outside, the rain ends. Drops cling to rails and rooftops, shining in the lamplight before slipping away. The air feels lighter now, washed and cool. From the harbour, a ship sounds its horn, low, measured, calm, crossing from shore to shore. Its echo folds into the night, a final note of distance before quiet settles completely. The city rests, but it does not sleep. A handful of windows remain lit. Small beacons scattered through the dark. Some belong to late workers, some to night watchers, and some perhaps to no one at all. They stay glowing, patient, marking the hours until dawn. Wind brushes the antennas and flagpoles high above. The sound is a thin, constant thread, a single drawn note stretched across the skyline. Below, the streets gleam, empty for now, waiting for footsteps that will return. The puddles mirror every lamp, each reflection trembling like a thought half remembered. In this stillness, Manhattan seems weightless. The towers that once rose from soil and sweat now appear to float, their edges softened by mist, their bodies shining faintly in silver light. They hold the warmth of the day within their walls, releasing it slowly into the cooling air. The city breathes, long, measured even.
An endless inhalation and exhalation of stone and light.
Somewhere, a cat crosses an alley, stepping carefully through puddles. Far below ground, a train hums in its tunnel, the sound rising like a ghost through steel and concrete. The rhythm of life continues, quieter but unbroken. At the eastern edge of the island, the sky begins to pale. A soft ribbon of grey appears first, then the faintest blush of rose. The horizon opens slowly, as though the night itself were releasing its hold. Light touches the river, the surface brightens, and the tallest windows catch the first colour of morning. One by one, the towers awaken. Not by lamps this time, but by the returning sun. The glow climbs upward, gold, then white, filling the spaces between buildings with calm illumination. The reflections return, the river gleams again, and the city seems to stretch, quietly preparing for another day. Elevators rise, footsteps return, engines hum once more beneath the streets. The night gives way without struggle. The transition is smooth as breath. From high above, the island looks serene. A grid of lines and mirrored surfaces surrounded by still water. Each tower stands in perfect balance, each window catching the same soft light. The city inhales a long, steady motion that fills every corridor, every street, every waking heart. Then it exhales, releasing the last of the night's silence into morning. And beneath it all, deeper than the subways, deeper than the pilings that anchor every building, the same ancient rhythm continues. It is the pulse that began in the wooden floors of early houses and that moved through stone, through iron, through steel. It rises through every wall, it lives in every breath, and it settles again in the quiet spaces between sounds. When the first sunbeam touches the river, it finds the city exactly as it has always been, alive, patient, luminous, breathing in rhythm with the world. Closing reflections. The continuity of human hands. The link between past and present. Morning arrives quietly. Light settles over the city like a slow tide returning to shore. The glass towers glow pale gold and the long shadows of dawn stretch once again across the water. From this height, the world looks both new and familiar. Each day different, yet always the same. The hum of traffic begins far below. The rhythm of footsteps returns to the streets. Elevators rise, trains move, doors open. Somewhere, coffee brews, paper rustles, voices begin to weave the sound of another morning. Yet beneath all of this motion, something ancient stirs, something unchanged by centuries. It is the same rhythm that guided the farmers by the Nile, the builders of Teotihuacan, the drummers beneath open skies. Every movement, every breath, still follows that quiet pattern of repetition and return. The skyline, tall and bright, reflects the same order that ancient cities once sought: lines meeting lines, space balanced against space, a design both human and natural. Steel has replaced stone, but the intention remains. To build upward, to reach light, to mark the passing of time with structure. When wind moves through the narrow spaces between towers, it carries a sound like distant waves or a faint drumbeat. It echoes softly, as though the city itself remembers the music of the world before it. The noise of the present folds into the silence of the past, each one completing the other. Every generation builds, each one layering its work upon what came before. Streets rest on older streets, words rest on older languages, dreams rest on older dreams. The past is not gone, it continues quietly beneath the surface, steady as a foundation, invisible but strong. When night comes again, the lights will rise where the stars once guided travelers. The pattern repeats, not in imitation, but in rhythm. The human hand continues its slow, endless work of shaping the world. And through it all, the same gentle pulse connects everything: the river, the drum, the skyline, the living and the remembered, bound together by the simple, timeless beat of existence. The rhythm of work and time, continuing. Evening returns, again soft and familiar. The city exhales and the light begins to fade. From windows high above the river, the day's glow lingers a moment longer, then slowly dissolves into the blue hush of dusk. Below, the rhythm continues, the quiet motion of life repeating itself in endless, gentle patterns. Hands fold papers, lights are turned off, footsteps cross the same corridors they crossed yesterday. Each sound joins a larger harmony. The steady hum of a world in motion, neither hurried nor still simply breathing. Across the centuries, the pattern is unchanged. The farmers once bent over the soil at dawn. Today, others sit before screens that glow with their own kind of light. The tools are different, but the rhythm, the pulse of work, of creation, of patience, remains the same. Every gesture answers the one that came before. Every task becomes part of the long continuity of time. Somewhere, a clock strikes the hour. Its tone carries through walls and alleys, soft but clear. It marks the boundary between what has passed and what begins again. Then silence follows, and in that silence the rhythm keeps moving. Not in sound, but in presence. The night deepens. Trains slow, lights dim, and the vast city grows quiet once more. Yet even in stillness, motion continues, the slow turning of the earth,
The steady pulse of blood.
the soft breath of someone falling asleep. Time does not rush. It unfolds. Every second meets the next, like waves touching shore.
Work continues, rest continues,
The balance holding steady as it has since the beginning. If you listen closely,
beneath the hum of the world.
you can hear it. The faint, eternal rhythm that connects every moment to every other.
It is the sound of time breathing.
The sound of life continuing, the sound of tomorrow quietly arriving. The world turns, the rhythm endures, and everything, every sound, every hand, every light, moves gently forward into the endless calm of time. Closing breaths, silence, release into sleep. The rhythm softens now. The world grows quiet. The sounds that carried the story, water, footsteps, wind, begin to fade one by one. Only breath remains, steady and slow, moving in and out like the tide beneath the stars. You are still, yet not separate. The same pulse that shaped rivers and cities now moves gently within you. Each inhale gathers what the day has held. Each exhale releases it back to the calm around you. There is no hurry. There is only time unfolding, smooth and endless. The air is soft. The body sinks a little deeper. Muscles loosen. Thoughts drift apart like small clouds dissolving in sky. The weight of the day melts into the quiet warmth of the present moment. Somewhere far away, the last traces of light fade beyond the horizon. The rivers keep flowing,
The cities keep breathing,
and the earth keeps turning. But here, everything is at rest. The pulse slows, the breath steadies. The sound of the world becomes a whisper, then less than a whisper. You float between waking and dream, between memory and silence. In this space, there is nothing to do, nothing to hold, nothing to change, only the soft movement of breath, the slow rhythm of being. Let the breath grow lighter. Let the thoughts fall away. Let the silence open fully around you. The rhythm continues, gentle, unbroken,
carrying you quietly.
into the long, peaceful rest of sleep.